big story of the day is the BBC, which basically stands accused of deliberately keeping secrets from the people who pay for it, and that is us, the licence fee payers. This is a cover-up scandal, folks. You're going to learn all about it in just a second. But in the meantime, we're asking you, is it time the public stopped paying for the BBC?
It's a favourite question, isn't it?
Well, I mean, it's straightforward, but you're going to find out why you might be persuaded that it is in just a second. So let us know what you think. Give us a call on 0344 499 1000. You can text us on 87222. Don't forget to put talk in your message, or you can tweet us on X at TalkTV. So, yes, back to that top story now. And the BBC has denied trying to cover up events that led to Martin Bashir's explosive 1995 interview with Princess Diana. The corporation spent £150,000 trying to prevent internal emails surrounding the now infamous Panorama episode being released. But following a court order, 3,000 have now been made public, albeit heavily redacted.
Well, in a statement, the BBC said there is nothing to support the allegations that the BBC acted in bad faith in 2020, and we maintain this suggestion is simply wrong. Now, in the emails, Bashir, who is accused of deceiving Diana into agreeing to the interview, claims he was a victim of racism in the years that followed the scandal. He has accused colleagues of jealousy after they reportedly questioned how a second-generation immigrant could secure an interview with a senior royal. Well, the investigative journalist and filmmaker Andy Webb, who got those emails, joins us now. Andy, briefly, why is this so important? Why was getting that cache of emails so vital?
Well, I'll happy to get onto that in a minute. Just because you've just run by the figures, the costs of all this, before we forget that, I think the figure you quoted there was £150,000. I think there are very, very strong grounds for saying it's much more like considerably over £250,000. And the reason I say that very, very briefly is this. The BBC have confirmed to me that they have spent £151,000 just on hiring very, very clearly very, very expensive external lawyers. In fact, the lawyer who's been leading for the BBC is the very same lawyer who Boris Johnson chose to argue for him over Partygate. So they've spent £151,000 on their external legal advice. They've been working at this for getting on for 3 years internally. Now, I say it's not beyond the bounds of possibility that they've spent 100 grand on that. So there we are. I think an enormous amount of money has been spent, and the question, why should it be spent? And I think that question is particularly pertinent because one of the bizarre things about this entire case is that the BBC say these 10,000 documents, the more than 3,000 emails, which they released yesterday evening, 10,000 documents in total, they say that it's all irrelevant. They don't just say it's innocent, they say it's irrelevant. And so surely you've got to ask yourself, well, why do you spend, I say, £250,000 plus of licence payers' money, particularly to protect something that, as I say, is not just innocent in their view, it's wholly irrelevant.
I understand, Andy, and by the way, we've been following your ordeal for some years now, and congratulations. David has beaten Goliath, a very reluctant Goliath here, obviously. I've been covering the BBC for most of my checkered career, and the sort of an anomaly about it is publicly funded, paid for by the people, and throughout its history, it has done its level best to keep secrets from the people who pay for it. This is another egregious example of that habit that our state broadcaster has. So congratulations to that. But I gather that your legal battle is not over because you've received these emails that you had a right to receive. They finally gave them to you, even though even last night they didn't get them to you by the 5 p.m. deadline. What was that all about? And then you received them and they're redacted. They're full of black lines. The BBC says it's our duty to protect personal details. Well, it isn't their job to decide what's personal, is it?
I think, to be fair, and I do want to be fair, we must be fair. I mean, the BBC say that there will be things within this huge mass of data which they must protect. And there are provisions within the Freedom of Information Act that allow you to do just that. For instance, redacting a phone number, redacting a full email, things like that. The BBC also say that they have redacted to protect personal information. Now, that is clearly an extraordinarily broad category, it seems to me. Is it personal information that, let's say, I shoplifted a bottle, which I haven't done, but if I had shoplifted a bottle of whiskey from Sainsbury's, is that personal information which ought not to be made known? So massive reduction throughout these 10,000 pages. What I have to do is effectively play a kind of game of pin the tail on the donkey, which is to look for a particularly suspicious bit of redaction. And I will say that in total, there must be something like 20 to 30,000 redactions. I need to point to specific examples and then implore the tribunal, the judge and his two lay colleagues, I must admit, have been absolutely first class in all of this so far, but invite them to look behind the redaction and say, well, look, is the text that we're not allowed to see, is it truly genuine? Is it some personal information that ought not to be made public? Or is it something not so innocent? And I think it is fair to say that in this particular case, it would be wrong not to be skeptical, not to be suspicious, because the judge and his colleagues have said, and this isn't just the journalist talking here, the judge has said that in terms of how the BBC have handled this whole affair, he has serious concern. And at another point in the judge's findings, the precise words I won't try to recall, but it was strongly suggested that, let's put it this way, somebody who thought that the BBC had not been acting entirely in good faith, it would be understandable why one might feel that. And you will know as well as I do that to hear that from a judge in a judicial finding, that's really serious stuff. That's got quite serious when the good faith of an institution as big and important as the BBC is even called into question.
Yeah, I mean, the judge was quite excoriating about the BBC, basically said that throughout these proceedings, in your legal attempt to get these emails, that the BBC had basically behaved like a bad actor. Sorry, over to you, Alex.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, to me, it goes through the heart of the BBC claiming they have integrity. I think the corporation often likes to think it's head and shoulders above its competitors in the private sector and thinks they uphold the highest standards of journalism. This goes to the very heart of this matter. This journalist essentially forged bank statements, created a web of lies to induce paranoia in the princess to give this interview, which arguably changed the course of the monarchy. Now, what I think is quite interesting, as part of these emails, it's been revealed that in 2020, he was saying that actually, if it was a dynastic journalist like David Dimbleby who had done this, no one would have cared. This was about the colour of his skin. To me, that seems very much like him essentially trying to play the race card to get himself out of trouble.
That may be so. I mean, frankly, I wouldn't see it as my place to, comment on that one way or the other. I mean, I think it was quite extraordinary to read that. Interestingly enough, what Martin Bashir had to say there, extraordinary as it sounds, whether it's defensible or not, who knows? But oddly enough, that was one of the very few bits of this whole mass of data, which one could argue was actually irrelevant to the issue, because that, I hadn't asked about that. I'd asked about something very specific that was quite different. So I'm going to be very kind to the BBC here and say, well, yes, there was an element of irrelevancy, that particular element. That absolutely does not assure me that the other the rest of these 10,000 documents are irrelevant, because it doesn't kind of make sense that they would be. Very quickly, the search for these documents, the electronic search process, was conducted under search terms, which the BBC thought of. The keywords, what do these emails contain? What are the keywords? Who were they from? Who were they to? The BBC came up with those. The only thing I'd asked for was a particular date period, which was 3 months in 2020. So to say that we've come up with these search terms for you, we've done all this, we've done a massive search, we've got 3,288 emails, but sorry, they're all irrelevant. I mean, I was saying, well, were the two people called Martin Bashir? Were the two Princess Dianas?
Under the circumstances, it's not for them to decide what is relevant or irrelevant. And if I can make this comparison, there's a sort of Watergate element to this saga. So back in the mid-90s, Bashir seduces Princess Diana into this interview, this bombshell interview that certainly changed the course of royal history, by using very nefarious methods we now know. Now, we also now know that at that point, the bosses of the BBC became aware of this. And Tony Hall, then head of news, became Lord Hall, became the Director General, and 25 years or so later, he finds himself in the frame for what is alleged to be a cover-up in the mid-90s. And then the rest of these emails that we're talking about concern the current Director General, Tim Davie, who came in to firefight the revelations where I think it was the Daily Mail started to reveal this is what Bashir did. This entire interview is undermined. So this was Davie firefighting that. So what we're talking about is the emails between executives, senior executives of the BBC, frankly, to organise a cover-up. So it's one of those situations where, yes, Bashir's crimes were appalling, terrible, but the cover-up is the real scandal here, isn't it?
It is, and it's interesting that you should mention Watergate, because an analogy that I've sort of thought was quite neat to sum this up is to tell the Watergate story as if it's a story about burglars, because to focus solely on Martin Bashir and what he did, and he has been well and truly named and shamed, and to a degree suffered. His career has certainly suffered, but to concentrate solely on what Bashir did is to, as I say, it's to concentrate on the burglars who broke into the Watergate Hotel and stole the documents or whatever they did, and not to consider the actual important elements of that story, which were, of course, what happened in the White House. And to me, what I'm most interested in is what senior BBC executives were actually doing back in 1996, but more importantly, what they were doing in 2020, because the cover-up that I say now exists was devised, planned, enacted by the people who are literally running the BBC today. And I think it's certainly something which concerns me, and I think would concern people more widely.
Absolutely.
You have received praise from Lord Spencer, Diana's brother, about what he says is, a brilliant work that has essentially been able to bring all of this to the surface. He talked about your tireless professionalism. We will never know what sort of psychological impact that this interview, but more the deceitful means used in order to force Diana to do this interview, had on the late princess. But what would you like to see happen now as a result of your investigation?
Well, what I want to see is what I want to see at last is, it's great to get the documents. That's wonderful. Now I need to go through the process that allows me to see what these documents actually say. And as I said, that involves identifying particular areas of redaction. It may be there are many whole pages have just been withheld, but it may be a whole page, it may be half a page, it may be a sentence, it may be half a sentence. And to go and say, well, look, let's see what actually is there. Let's see what actually is there. Of course, at the end of the day, it is possible, I don't think likely, but it's possible that maybe it is all thoroughly innocent. It's all thoroughly innocent. The point I would make is this, and I think nobody should forget that this isn't a rehash of something that happened, 29 years ago. It's not to find out more about Bashir's bank statements and what he actually said to Diana and so on and so forth, which was awful. This is to determine something that happened in 2020. And as I say, by people who are actually still running the organization today. And it is only by getting to see what is actually behind all these thousands of redactions that we will really know.
As I said earlier, Andy, the head of news back in the mid-90s, Tony Hall, went on to become Director General. He essentially had to step down because it was revealed that they did try to cover up they knew what Bashir did, and they made sure the public didn't find out. Now, going back to 2020, the time frame you're talking about, as you quite rightly say, many of these documents are redacted. You're going to try and get as much of that unredacted as possible. Not too much is emerging so far. Bashir has claimed that he was the victim of a kind of a racism. That's, as you say, not, I think, central to the equation. What I think might be, and I think this has emerged from the documents you've seen so far, is the BBC's claim in 2020, when everyone was trying to investigate this, we can't get on with our own investigation because Martin Bashir is too ill for us to speak to him. These documents, I believe, reveal that at that point the BBC was speaking to him every day.
Well, you're almost right there. I don't know. Sorry, I put in yet another Freedom of Information request, asking to see emails that were exchanged between BBC managers, news bosses, and Martin Bashir at this very key period where it was claimed he was too ill to be consulted. Lo and behold, I get 38 emails which reveal there is virtually daily contact between Mr. Bashir and his bosses at the BBC. So much so that one of the emails, it's hard to believe, but it is actually a discussion whereby Martin Bashir is consulted about the wording of the press release, which says he can't be consulted. If you think about it,
oh my goodness.
okay, I get it. Literally, it's Martin. We're thinking of saying this. What do you think, Martin? He says, yeah, that sounds good to me. Now, that is just quite extraordinary and important because I know we only have so long, but the reason advanced by the BBC for not releasing to me a particular document in 2020 that would indeed have given us great insight into how the cover-up back in the day was carried on. The only reason that was advanced for not releasing that to me was that Martin Bashir was too ill. Before they released it, they would have had to, for some reason, they say, consult Martin about it. Not sure why, but that's what they said. And they couldn't do it because he was too ill. Now, as I say, the emails demonstrate, they prove that that just is simply not true. And that's why I would absolutely not count myself, I wouldn't put myself in any camp, that says you're a BBC hater, a BBC basher, whatever it is. But when the BBC just keeps on doing things like that and saying things which, in my view, are just simply not true and demonstrably not true, it's kind of hard. Well, I was going to say, it's certainly easy to wish that a different set of people were running the BBC.
To say the least.
Andy, fantastic work. Keep it up and really excellent to talk to you. I hope we talk to you again very soon. I'm a great admirer, seriously. Thank you very much. That was Andy Webb. We're still